Constance.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I think a good place to start is the Cabinet Secretary's response to the committee report when in correspondence Derek McKai said, "The answer as to how we best support our business base does not come from one voice. It is through the breadth and diversity of opinion that we will ensure the right choices are made." And I believe that that is a mature reflection of where we're at, and I'm very sad to say that that mature reflection was somewhat lacking in the COSLA response to the committee report. Now, I want to be absolutely crystal clear in stating my fundamental belief in local democracy and local accountability. For example, I really want to see the local governance review herald a new relationship between local and national government and the communities that we seek to serve. And it's also fair to say that committee, in calling out the risks of the withdrawal of European structural funds, has actually stood up for local government and the local business support programmes. Brexit, whatever our views, has never been far from our thoughts. But the central point that members of the committee across the political divide coalesced around is that Business Gateway is a nationwide service that is delivered locally, a good service, as the convener of the committee said, but with ample room for improvement. And a number of specific recommendations were made around reviewing key performance indicators in collaboration with stakeholders and the business community, external monitoring of performance against targets, better publicly available local information on financial inputs and outcomes, transparency around budgets, etc., etc. None of which, in my view, is rocket science or particularly radical. Is it not, I suggest, the humdrum of the normality of everyday life? Yet we have seen a real resistance, sadly, from COSLA to much of this agenda. And COSLA persistently stated throughout the response that Business Gateway is a local service subject to scrutiny by democratically elected councillors who are accountable and have to operate within the standing orders of their own councils, which are audited annually and subject to best value. This is absolutely true, but it misses the bigger picture of a modern, participative civic democracy which rates high on transparency, is inclusive in its approach and is able to develop meaningful partnerships with communities of place and interest so services are shaped by the needs of users. In other words, accountability and scrutiny of one sphere of government will take place at many levels in many different ways. It does not come from one voice. And that brings me to diversity and the recognised wisdom that supporting more women, rural Scotland, people living with a disability, young people and those from our BME community into business is not just the right thing to do, but for the sake of our economy and to reduce the cost of inequality, it is also the smart thing to do. It is absolutely necessary. And therefore, statements such as Business Gateway is a universal service which is available to all does not, in my view, do enough in terms of recognising and removing the seen and unseen barriers faced by underrepresented groups. Again, lack of data was an issue and no solid overarching commitment to find the best ways to reach underrepresented groups to tap into all of our talents. And on that point, committee made a very specific and practical recommendation for a wider range of more tailored and targeted programmes. And again, COSLA's response was somewhat lacking, stating that with limited resources, the partners must focus their efforts on those businesses most likely to achieve a result. Now, this response is simply not good enough because, in the context of this reply, it implied an inherent bias by omission against businesses from underrepresented groups. Yes, briefly.
Jamie Hepburn.
Again, I make the point I can't speak for COSLA, but just to underline very clearly through a race equality action plan, through the commitments we made through the Women in Enterprise Action framework and the action group that I chair, we are very clearly determined to see significant and vast improvements in this area.
Angela Constance.
Thank you, President Officer, and I'm pleased to hear that the Minister once again put his commitment on record, and also to say that committee, in fairness, heard some great evidence, for example, from Glasgow about their very proactive outreach to underrepresented groups, their tailored programmes for women, their work with social enterprises and supporting employers to recruit and retain people with disabilities. But there is one area that I would in particular like to press the government benches further on, and that's the recommendation to create a national head of women in business to coordinate national policy and to work towards the establishment of a national women's centre for business. Now, the Cabinet Secretary response was that the Minister for Business was committed to developing, I quote, the concept of a women's business centre. Again, somewhat lacking in specific detail on the if, when and how, and to be frank, I found it a bit limp. So I would be really grateful if the Minister, in his closing remarks, just could be a wee bit more rock and roll and fill in some of the blanks for us. Or alternatively, he could just say, aye, we're doing it, and make a very clear commitment to the national head of women in business, the creation of that post, and to establish a national women's centre for business. And at that, I shall draw my remarks to a close, Presiding Officer. Thank you.